My guest today is Dr. Ken Redcross. He's the author of Bond, the Four Cornerstones of a Lasting and Caring Relationship with Your Doctor. We're going to talk about communities most at risk for COVID-19 and what they should do. Dr. Redcross, Lanny James, how you doing today?
I am wonderful, Lanny. How are you? And good evening, everybody out there.
Well, good to have you on. Well, this coronavirus thing right now, how's it looking? Are we swinging on the downside across the whole nation collectively or in just some states? How are we looking on this thing at this point?
Well, that's a good question, Lanny. So, look, the numbers are, in a way, stabilizing. I think a lot of people are kind of getting the message as far as how important the mask is for the respiratory virus. So, we're kind of getting to a point maybe of a smidgen of stability. The problem is that there are certain groups that are still being adversely affected, especially African Americans and Latinos as well.
Why is that?
Well, if you really look, if you go to the CDC website, everyone, and you'll see that there's 3 or 4 disease states. There's diabetes, lung disease, heart disease, and obesity, and all 4 of those are adversely affected by those who get the coronavirus. And so that's something that's pretty rampant in the African-American community as well as the Latino community. But the interesting thing is this, Lanny, all of those conditions have something in common, and they all are associated with low vitamin D states. In other words, vitamin D deficiency. So there may be some information around that on vitamin D actually being important because we already know how important vitamin D is for our immune system.
All right, if you want to supplement what you're eating with vitamin D, what do you recommend? Do you go to the drugstore and get something, or should your doctor prescribe it? And what do you recommend? Just plain vitamin D, is there a derivation thereof?
Well, that's a good question, Lanny. So, look, if there's anything everyone leaves this talk with us tonight is that I want to challenge everyone out there to know your vitamin D levels. In other words, as I've been saying, Lanny, get on my level. My vitamin D level is 60. I want everyone out there to be between 40 and 60 with their levels. Now, the good thing is vitamin D is inexpensive. And to answer your question directly, Lanny, it's vitamin D3 that we have that's over the counter. But once again, let's check the levels and see where we're actually kind of living at that point. There is a website called thepowerofd.org. And the reason why I mention that, Lanny, is because not only can you order an at-home test kit, because a lot of people are having a hard time getting to their doctor's office, but you can also get great information about vitamin D. And even when you get your results, plug it into the calculator on that website, which will answer your question as to how much vitamin D you should be taking.
What's the difference in D3 and plain vitamin D, or is there any?
Oh, no, they're the same. So look, everyone, so you'll see that there's vitamin D2 and there's vitamin D3. Vitamin D2 is the one that you typically get from your doctor because your levels are profoundly low. We'll use vitamin D2 to kind of boost you up, and then we're going to put you on vitamin D3, which is the reason why I mentioned at thepowerofd.org, that calculator is incredibly helpful because you don't have to really do a guessing game, Lanny. You kind of know how much you need to take. Now, as we're all trying to figure out ways, because obviously vitamin D is not a treatment for the coronavirus, but, Lanny, we know that vitamin D is incredibly important for our immune system. So why would you want to test your immune system, especially with the flu on its way as well?
I'm living in South Florida now. I'm in Margate, just a little bit west of Pompano Beach, way down here, get a lot of sunshine. I understand that you can get a pretty good amount of vitamin D from the sun. Is that the same as the vitamin D that you would take as a supplement? And how do you know
I'll tell you,
too much? If your skin gets to cracking a little bit, that might be too much. But what about getting out in the sun and getting vitamin D that way?
No, that's a good point there, Lanny, and that's a little harder, everyone, because you're right. You can go out in the sun, spend up to 20 to 30 minutes, and get about 10,000 international units a day. But the challenge is this. Number one, we don't always get out. A lot of us are actually working in the home. Some patients of mine, for instance, are older, and they can't go out. And then you're right, Lanny. Some of my patients who are able to tan and so forth, then there's problems with absorption of the rays from the sun because you have a sunburn now. And also keep in mind that our diet is not particularly rich in vitamin D. So what you find, Lanny, is that even with the sun exposure, at some point everywhere in the United States, we're still during a time where it's the fall or the winter, even in Florida, that gets to a point where there's not always full sun. And so, therefore, it's hard to keep your vitamin D levels where they need to be to make sure that they're actually protecting you.
Well, look, Doc, I'm no spring chicken. I've said this too many times, but I turned 80 on April 24th.
Oh, that's my mom's birthday. Wow.
Oh, is it? I'll be darned. Well, listen, one of the crazy things about it, as you get older, and one of the hardest things about it, Doc, I've lost so many good friends in the last few years.
Yeah.
The old anchor man I used to work with at the TV station in Monroe passed away just a couple of months ago, and I just found out I used to do pro football with the Shreveport Steamer of the World Football League, and I met a guy from Birmingham who did the Birmingham Americans, and he moved to New Orleans and became the voice of the Saints, and he and I become good friends. But he texted me about a week ago and said, Lanny, I have the virus.
Yeah.
Now, Dr. Redcross, he has had a stroke in the last year. And one reason us older folks are so susceptible is that by the time we get our age, we've all got something wrong with us, some kind of an underlying condition.
Yeah.
And I worry about him. And he tells me, Doc, that they're not even keeping him in the hospital. He's able to stay at home. That's a pretty good sign that he's got a chance to make it through this, right? Now, he's probably 77. He's a little bit younger than me.
Well, no, look, that's a great sign. And look, this is the reason why we're talking about this tonight. Look, everyone, we know about masks, we know about social distancing, we've been washing our hands, but the point is, now what? And vitamin D is that answer to now what? Now that we're understanding, look, we have studies that show that vitamin D is able to help protect us from cold and flu-like viruses. We know that vitamin D can help us as far as improve our insulin levels for those who are diabetics, or even maybe have a role in weight management. So we know the data is out there and it's coming in, Lanny, and that's the message that I hope people like your friend get and all of your listeners to say, maybe I should go and get on Dr. Redcross's level and see where I am as far as my vitamin D level and how I feel.
Do you recommend that they check it themselves or try to go to the doctor and get a vitamin D level reading that way?
Well, yeah, that's why there's two ways. Look, here in New York, things are opening up a little bit more. So you could try to get an appointment with your doctor, which can be easier for some. But I have some patients who are older and don't want to go out, and that's when they go to thepowerofd.org, as I mentioned earlier, where you can order a kit that will be sent home to you. And when you do get the actual kit, Lanny, you actually do a finger stick. And you send the results back in, and they come back to you. So it's kind of almost a concierge-y type of way, I think. It's nice in the comforts of your own home to get your levels tested.
All right, Dr. Redcross is our special guest. We're going to take a break. If you've got a question or a comment for him, give us a call. 324-1500. We'll be right back right after this. Welcome back, everybody. Our special guest today is Dr. Redcross. We're talking about COVID-19, the coronavirus. Doc, I watch a lot of television, and I'll be honest with you, I don't watch any sitcoms or anything like that. I'm usually on National Geographic. Look at some veterinary shows. I love documentaries. I love a lot of stuff like that. But I've seen they had a series running on the end of the world. And they talk about it, maybe the aliens coming in or some other things.
Right.
The thing I've always worried about is some kind of virus or bacteria that's spread around the world, Doc, that we cannot do anything about. Now, it looks like we may be making some progress with some kind of a vaccine with this coronavirus. But realistically, as we look at this thing, if we get through this session, isn't there a distinct possibility this thing could rear its ugly head every year from now on? How do we get a read on that?
Well, I'll tell you. Look, okay, so as we talk about the vaccine, everyone, you'll hear a lot in the news. And let's please remember that this virus is agnostic. It doesn't care whether you're Democrat or Republican. It's just an equal opportunity sort of virus. And so hopefully soon, I'm thinking probably mid-year for a true vaccine, honestly. But there's so many kind of hang-ups we have to get around, Lanny. Number one, we have to get trust for the vaccine, for people to feel comfortable putting a vaccine into their bodies. So that's going to be a big education piece. And so when you're thinking of something like this virus, which as I mentioned before, we don't have a hold on this thing, but we're starting to at least learn a lot more about it. The only problem is that it's starting to affect different areas of the United States where it's not as populated. So you're right, Lanny. We're learning, and this is something that we have to continue to be very vigilant about. We don't have time to fight, but we have to come together, and then we can live to fight another day about our political differences. But for now, this is about health for everybody, for humankind. So you're right. This is a virus that we have to take seriously, continue to learn, and continue practicing those three things. Or I guess I added a fourth now. It's the hand washing, making sure we have the distance, the mask, and also looking at things such as vitamin D that can help boost your immune system and get on my level, which is I want everyone to remember two numbers, 40 and 60. That's the range that I want to make sure your vitamin D level is in to really help to support your immune system and hopefully keep you well.
Doc, when you talk about tests, do people volunteer to be kind of guinea pigs on this thing, and they monitor these people for a week or a couple of months, or how does that work, and how much danger are these people putting themselves in when they make themselves available to test this vaccine? How does that process play out?
Yeah, the vaccine, there's a lot of people who are very open to trying the vaccine because they want to help. That's kind of the American way, I guess. And so there are people who put themselves, some would say, in harm's way. With these trials and so forth, it's very important that it's diverse. And that's why I say it's a little bit of a challenge right now in the minority community, which is very skeptical of the medical community. And so you have to have kind of a vaccine of the people to make sure that it works for everyone. And so you have to have that diversity in the trials, and that's where some of the challenges are. So as everyone is out there taking in the news or commercials, you're going to see there's going to be an outreach to minorities to get that trust, bring them in to make sure that we get a good vaccine that kind of works for all, and also different age groups as well. Very important, because as we've seen, the coronavirus has been especially hard on older adults. Now, the other issue is that the flu's coming in another few weeks or so. And last year, if you recall, the past 2 years, it was very difficult on children. So I don't want that to be for lack of a better word, the perfect storm, Lanny, in other words. So we do need to keep in mind that this can get serious. It can get bad quickly if we really don't kind of come together as a nation and really as a world.
Trump's catching a lot of flack because he kind of tried to downplay this
yeah.
in the beginning because he didn't want to panic Americans, and I can see that side of it. But realistically, I grew up in the 50s, and I played football in 1957, and I was the first guy on my football team to get the Asiatic Flu.
Wow. Wow.
And Dr. Redcross, that was terrible. It was terrible.
Yeah.
We were unbeaten. We didn't practice all week. We played a team that hadn't won a game, and they beat us 27-0. But I looked it up since I've been down here. 70,000 Americans died from the Asiatic flu. Now, when this coronavirus first started coming around, a lot of people were saying that the flu was actually more deadly than this coronavirus. And some of these people that get the coronavirus, this is kind of a two-edged sword here. They have no symptoms at all.
Right.
Yet I guess they can spread this thing around. And the difficulty would be you won't even know to look out for these people because they're showing no symptoms. How does that play out as a plus or a minus? I can see it from both sides, that it's a good thing that these people don't get sick, but it's also a bad thing that they can carry this thing around and not even know they've got it.
Yeah, and that's the reason why the masks are important, right, Lanny? That's what I mean, because it's not about protecting yourself. It's about protecting others. I mean, that Asiatic flu you were talking about was at the end in the 1950s. It was an H2N2. It was a bad virus at that time. You're right. So that's probably one of the last times we had such a bad virus at that point. And you're right. I heard as far as some of the political stuff, but once again, and I'll tell everyone, look, I am right down the middle. I'm on neither side. This is about health. This is about public health. and about us, as I like to say, living to fight another day about our political differences, you know, and we all have different ideologies, but we all want to be here on God's green earth, and we all want to be here and be here healthy for our loved ones and also for ourselves as well. So it becomes incredibly important. To your point right there, Lanny, those asymptomatic people, that's why the masks are important. It's not political, but it's public health. It's a different.
It shouldn't be political. This is about American. No. It's about people trying to stay alive and do the right thing. What do you think? Is it something that's likely to come back every year, or is it too early to tell? How do you get a read on that? And that's where the vaccine could be so important. But maybe the most important thing now is being able to treat this thing after you got it therapeutically. How are we coming in that department?
Yeah, you know what, Lenny, I think it's going to be both ways. I think what's going to happen, everyone, we put so much money, so much time, and so many resources. I think in a year and a half or so, we're going to nail this thing, meaning that we're going to have a vaccine for this novel coronavirus. I don't think it's going to be one of those things that comes back each and every year like influenza. Influenza is a virus, everyone, but it's a little different. It has a genetic shift or drift, it's called, so it can kind of mutate a bit. That's why each and every year we know it's coming. It starts usually around Australia, through Asia, swings up to us. We can anticipate it. The point is,
what worked last year?
It's new.
But Doc, what worked last year as a vaccine may not work this year because of the mutation of the flu, and I don't know how many strains of that stuff there are.
Yeah.
This may be something we'll fight the rest of our lives. Some kind of an invasive virus or bacteria that comes into and spreads around the world. Isn't this something that just made you of a different variety each and every year?
Well, I hear you there, Lanny, because that's an argument that a lot of people have about whether they want the flu vaccine or not. Because the flu vaccine, a good one, really is about 30% effective. So it's not perfect, and you're right, it's able to change, but lots of years we're able to at least figure out the most virulent strains, meaning the strongest strains. And like last year, usually they're quadrivalent, meaning there's 4 strains in there, Lanny, and we try to get the 4 that are the most destructive so that even if you get the flu, we hope that at least because your body, in a sense, has already seen it, it won't be as severe. But I hear what you're saying. A lot of people have that argument as far as the flu shot and the fact that it comes each and every year, and it's not perfect, but it's kind of what we have for the moment.
Let me ask you this. We talk about the flu or we talk about this coronavirus. It seems like the end thing that always gets them is pneumonia. Why do these diseases, I guess it's mainly because they're in the lungs, manifest themselves and convert to pneumonia, which is what really is the death knell for so many old people today? What makes it cross that line?
Yeah, because everyone, these are respiratory viruses we're talking about. And if you want to get a little scientific, one of the interesting things about the coronavirus is that it latches on to a particular receptor that is very much concentrated in the lung tissue. So that's why you'll see things such as pneumonia, flu. What's the number one complication of the flu? Pneumonia. Once again, a respiratory virus or illness, which once again gets back to our immune system, everyone, which is the reason why, look, we can't test our immune system, right? But we can test our vitamin D. We know that vitamin D is involved for both arms of the immune system. So it's just important to add that kind of to what we're using each and every day to stay well. But you're right. When you're talking about respiratory viruses or respiratory illnesses, it's pneumonia that tends to be the worst complication, especially as we get older. Because as we get older, especially if you're a former smoker or have some other comorbid illnesses such as diabetes and high blood pressure, all of those things complicate things tremendously, especially as we get older.
I'm a little puzzled about something here, and I've been following this now for several months. Watching the figures with the worldwide cases of the coronavirus, the U.S. cases, the number of cases of people that have died in this country, and the number of people who've died in the world. And I think I'm pretty close on this, and it has not changed. This is what has amazed me over these months. About one in every 4 cases of the coronavirus is in the United States. And it seems like it's about 4-1 as far as the deaths are concerned. We're supposed to be so technologically advanced, medically probably, by far the greatest country in the world. Why are those numbers so high for us?
Well, look, I mean, there's a lot of things going on at that point, especially as we're talking about it. I mean, once again, there needs to be a centralized public health message of us all coming together and doing the right things, to be honest. I had a colleague of mine who I kept in touch with from Spain while he was going through this, and another one in France while he was going through this. And look, they were shut in, everyone. I mean, they were literally shut in each and every day for a very long time, and as hard as that is for us to kind of grasp, they were actually lowering or flattening this curve a lot better than we were at the time. And then we all sort of opened up, and look, I get we have to work. I get that as well, but there needs to be a balance. But once again, we have to be together, Lanny. We can't do this as a one-off thing. Look, you're a sports guy. You played football. Your team, unfortunately, you lost that last game, but you guys were a team, and you guys were almost there because you guys all worked together. And that's what we all have to do as 300 million people here in the United States. We need to figure out a common thread and try to work together to get rid of this thing and get back to living our lives again.
I've been out of school 62 years. I just got back from Michigan. I played for a school called Flint Tech. We were third in the nation scholastically. But here we are 62 years later. We all get together and play golf, and we all been out of school now for 62 years.
I love that.
And we still talk about these things, I remember our quarterback coughing on the bus, and it sounded like he had the croup. It was so deep from his gut when he coughed. But I remember playing on a Monday practicing, and I got sick just almost immediately. And by the end of the week, the whole team had it. And the way it worked in Michigan, you'd hear about it hitting Fenton High School, and they'd be down for a week or two. Then it would hit Lapeer or something. I mean, it was crazy how it worked, but it knocked everybody got it.
Yeah. I remember that. I remember that in a different way because I played sports as well, and we traveled from school to school to school, and you're right. It was like the whole team was down. But, we didn't think about it back then. I mean, even now we understand the importance of hand hygiene, but back then that wasn't even conveyed in the same way. When you think about it in the team sport, it becomes increasingly important to make sure that hygiene and hand hygiene and covering your mouth and that sort of thing is really focused upon.
Well, we shouldn't have been beaten because we shouldn't have played the game. We didn't practice.
That would have.
Well, everybody was.
Good point.
The coach asked us if we wanted to play, and we all said we did. Being that macho, indestructible 17-year-old, boy, we sure paid a price for it. Look, we're going to take a break. Back with more with Dr. Redcross. If you got a question or a comment, 324-1500. We'll be right back. Our special guest is Dr. Redcross, and we're talking about COVID-19, the coronavirus. Still a lot of questions about it. We may be finally making some headway against this thing. Got a phone call from Paul in Monroe. Paul, how you doing?
Oh, good.
Great, Lanny. I think I may have a perspective on your numbers. So the human brain has a way of processing, the reticular activation system. If you buy a new car, you start noticing there's a lot of other people that decided for that same new car. Well, what has happened with COVID is if you start rewarding hospitals for COVID patients, then everybody that can be a COVID patient becomes a COVID patient. And your other question about advances in medicine, if you create an environment where people can be easily tested, then somebody gets a cold and they're thinking, well, do I have a cold? Do I have COVID? Well, I'll just go get free testing for COVID. So if you pick any other disorder and you started looking at those numbers, if we started paying hospitals more for people who showed up with ingrown toenails, the numbers would move up substantially. If we started telling people that ingrown toenails could kill them, the number of cases of people going to doctors for ingrown toenails would increase substantially. So we tax cigarettes, hopefully, so people will smoke fewer cigarettes, and we give tax credits so people will put solar panels on their house. We motivate behavior by rewarding it, and that's part of why your numbers in the U.S. are skewed. Also, if you look at countries with socialized medicine, if it takes you a year and a half to get a hip transplant, maybe it takes you 6 months to get COVID tested. Or maybe you just don't go sit at the hospital and wait in line for 10 hours when you have a cough. So the ease of access to testing, to medical care in the United States skews numbers when you compare it to socialist countries. My wife's cancer doctor is from Greece. She broke her ankle while she was visiting her parents. And I asked her, I said, how'd that socialized medicine work out for you? She said, it worked out great. I paid $5,000. I got my ankle fixed that day. If it wasn't, I would have had to wait 6 months for the actual surgery. They would just patch it up. So if that was a case of COVID, would we have missed it altogether because you would have stayed home 3 days, started feeling better, and gone to work instead of testing it? I know it's a lot of information, but I wanted to hit you with that.
Well, thank you for calling. Appreciate it.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but I appreciate that, you know, that information or sharing that, because let me tell you, that is not different than what I've heard from some other people as well, because everyone's kind of, I don't know, sometimes a little suspicious about diagnosis. Is it really as bad as we say it is? Are we saying it? So look, it's tough. That is a perfect kind of comment for kind of that displays what everybody's feeling. Everybody has a view, and some think that things are kind of not the way they are, and some think just the opposite. And it's tough. It's really tough to kind of sift through the true information, isn't it? It's really tough. But I'll tell you this. The whole goal is, look, I just want everyone well. We all just want to be healthy. And once again, we can have these discussions when we're healthy, everyone, and not necessarily fight and bicker. Let's just get the numbers to the best of our ability, hopefully honest numbers, and let's move forward together as a nation. But I appreciate his comment and information for sure.
You know, Dr. Redcross, I've followed a lot of this stuff, and I know that down through the years, many of these viruses that, spread on a worldwide basis maybe have originated in Africa or somewhere like that, but most of them, the way I understand it, have started with animals. And I understand that in this city in China that they had a lot of open markets where a lot of these animals were brought in. Have they traced the beginning of this thing? Was this another one that started with the animal kingdom? And how do you stop these things? If they start that way, how do you stop it from its infancy?
Well, Lanny, that's another difficult question in a sense, because they've gone back to trace it. They were thinking it probably is some sort of animal vector, maybe bats, maybe this. Once again, that's that information piece where we need to get some honest, accurate information. I'm sure the CDC obviously has that information. But the point is, you're right. There's a lot of times where animals are vectors. What I mean by that, everyone, a vector is, in other words, something that can carry something. And when that animal vector gets kind of mixed in with our DNA, obviously that's when you get something like a novel coronavirus, meaning new, something that our body hasn't seen, and our immune system doesn't really know what to do with that, everyone, which is the reason why we've had so many deaths, and the fact that our bodies haven't really seen this sort of virus. And so it's something that is incredibly difficult for our bodies to fight, which is the reason why we're scrambling to get something that treats this, whether it's, as you mentioned before, Lanny, whether it's going to be a vaccine, whether it's going to be a direct treatment for that, even though for viruses we typically go with vaccines because you can't really kill it in that way. It's kind of already a dead material in a sense when you deal with a virus versus a bacteria, which is amenable to an antibiotic. But anyway, Lanny, the point is that we may have to come at some different angles to really knock this thing out.
Well, a lot of people have said that it's maybe not good to keep everybody from getting it because we're not going to have that natural immunity that your body builds up over time. If somebody gets it, has no symptoms, and, they don't feel bad, their body has built up is against this thing. Is school out on that? Is it too early to know?
Yeah, it is, because we don't know yet. We don't know if after you've been exposed, or we've heard. In fact, I've had a couple of different seminars I've been a part of where one faction says that, hey, after you get it, you have an antibody response. But I think a lot of them are not necessarily comfortable in the fact saying that you can't get it again, or that you have antibodies that are going to protect you, in other words. So the jury's still out a little bit on that data. But once again, literally it changes every day, everyone. I'm usually with kind of a bunch of different scientists almost every other day, and something is new. We were finding some of these COVID patients had conjunctivitis. Like, where did that come from? Meaning, but usually more of an allergic conjunctivitis, tearing. Obviously, we've heard about the smell and the taste. These are all things that we're learning each and every day as we learn more about this virus as we go along. So herd immunity is something that a lot of people think about, but we are not there yet. We are way too big as a nation, and it's something that's probably not going to be amenable before we hopefully find a vaccine before then.
Say this stuff. Joe, hey, okay. Joe, how you doing?
Hey, Joe.
I'm doing fine. Hold on, let me get you on speaker. Okay.
Okay.
I had two comments.
Sure.
Or two questions.
Okay.
Go ahead.
One is, what study has there ever been done that proved these face masks do any good whatsoever? Now, Dr. Fauci originally, before he made this a political thing, said that he recommended that you not wear a face mask, that all you would be doing is adjusting your face mask all day where you're getting the germs on your hands, you're putting it on your face, probably making it worse by having a face mask. And the second comment I had is there's no negotiating with the Democrats on this. There's no coming together on this. This is basically the Democrat flu because they have made it 110% political. They do not want it. They actually want, I believe in my heart, more deaths so they can blame it on Trump.
Well,
that's all I had to say about that.
Probably right on that.
Well, look, I thank you for your comment. I'll tell you this, it's interesting, because I've heard that on both sides. I've heard that because, as I told you guys, I am right in the middle. I'm independent. I don't have an allegiance to either side. I just want everyone healthy. And let me tell you about the mask. That's a great comment, too, because, look, it's tough. But don't forget, we're dealing with a respiratory virus or illness, so we don't want respiratory droplets obviously passed from one to another. I understand everyone will say, well, Doc, what about the mask? Am I keeping it in? There's even one person that mentioned about CO2 and that sort of thing. Think about when you go to, for instance, have your appendix removed. Let's say you have a ruptured appendix. You go to the emergency room, to the operating room. If you get in that operating room, we are gowned up. We have on visors. We have on masks. You don't want us in trying to repair that appendix with respiratory droplets in there and that sort of thing. But look, I get right now, it is a really hot-button topic when it comes to masks and that sort of thing. All I can say, everyone, is that we do know it's a respiratory virus, regardless, Democrat or Republican, but we do know it's a virus that is passed by droplets. And so we just want to be careful. I'm just saying, I just want everyone to be careful. Look, I don't want you to potentially infect your loved one. I don't want you to infect potentially your child or your wife. And so I'm just trying to make sure that we all understand that, look, it's a respiratory illness, and we want to make sure that we're doing our best to keep our loved ones healthy. That's all, guys. No politics, at least to the best of my ability. And once again, to give you another alternative, the mask we've talked about and our views on that. We've talked about the social distancing, and we've talked about hand washing, but we're also talking about vitamin D to boost our immune system, everyone, and getting between 40 and 60 and getting your doctor to test it. And let's see how you feel. So if the mask is something that, as our last caller is very adamant about, look, he's passionate about it, and I can appreciate that. So maybe at least check your vitamin D level. Let's keep you healthy. Even if I wish you did wear a mask because I want you safe, but I hear you too. So I understand, and everybody has their own view, but I want you healthy. So at least let's get our vitamin D levels checked. You know, there was an interesting study. It was actually a correlation study here, Lanny, and it showed that those who had a vitamin D level that was under 19, there was a mortality rate really approaching that of 100% with those patients that had COVID. Now, when it was above 34, it was almost zero. Now, once again, that's a correlation study, but I'm only mentioning that, everyone, once again, not for a treatment of COVID, as we're all kind of trying to wrap our minds around this and what's best, but it at least gets back to the point is, why not at least test your vitamin D? Let's at least have our vitamin D levels up so we can protect ourselves. That way we don't have to argue. We don't have to argue about all these things. Let's at least take care of our health to the best of our ability. And let's do that by getting it tested, whether you go to the powerofd.org or you go to your doctor, whichever, everyone. But let's stay healthy, and let's just try to be healthy and happy. And that's where I want us all to get to at some point, I hope very, very soon.
Good stuff, Dr. Redcross. Appreciate you taking the time to be on our show.